So for those of you just joining us now, welcome. Meopar is pleased to present the third webinar in our series. Kate Headley will share her expertise on using social media to build your personal brand as a scientist. So Kate, over to you.
Thank you so much, and thank you to everyone who's online today. Please let me know if at any point you can't hear me. Feel free to ask your questions in Q&A, and of course I've left some time at the end of this presentation for questions and discussion. So I'm, as Laura said, I'm an independent strategic communications consultant. I've worked with nonprofits, governments. I've been on my own as an independent consultant for about 1.5 years now, helping clients with social media as well as media relations, strategic planning. And I didn't think I would be doing a lot of social media because I assumed that there's a lot of people doing it. But when it came to helping organizations do it right, do it well, I found myself quite a bit of work, and there's still quite a bit of a gap to close in the area of social media. So this slide might surprise you, but I'm not an expert in social media per se. So social media was barely in its infancy as I was wrapping up post-secondary education. I went through 4 years of university studying communications and another year of intensive public relations without social media being mentioned once. And I'm okay with that because honestly, the moment you print a textbook on social media, you're out of date. It's highly user-driven and it's constantly evolving. The hashtag, for example, wasn't invented by Twitter. It was a Twitter user who suggested it as a way to group conversations, like a keyword. Twitter originally rebuked the idea and said that it was just for the nerds. It would never catch on. But we all know how that turned out, of course. So when I present or coach on social media now, the strategies that I share are grounded in the principles behind effective communications. Social media is a tool through which I help clients, along with email marketing, media relations, direct mail, events, the list goes on. But today, as a professional communicator, what I do is I ensure that I stay current with the mechanics of my tools, like social media, so that I can take what I know about being a good communicator and marry that with the capabilities and limitations of certain channels. Here's someone tapping on, maybe it might be me, so it might be up against my sweater, so let me know if that continues. So social media, for all its accessibility, for how open it is, that can in turn be a bit of an intimidation factor in that there's so much going on social media. Social media channels, like whether it be Twitter or Facebook, even LinkedIn, they are truly microcosms of our whole world. But just as we do in the real world, users, us, can find little pockets or neighborhoods within which we can call it our own. There's a lot that I can say about social media. My objective with today's presentation is to help you understand what social media can do for you and to give you some ideas on how to use it effectively, whatever your purpose might be. So today I'm going to focus primarily on 2 things, and that's building your presence on social media and then connecting with others. The last section of the webinar will be a little bit more of a practical application where I'll show you, we'll go into some specific sites. Different sectors or industries have adopted social media at different rates in different ways. So for example, working with the Canadian Nurses Association for many years, I had to get nurses up to speed and comfortable with something that just didn't fit with their professional lives. They're connecting with people one-on-one every day in hospitals and clinics, so that they're not tweeting per se. The science and research community has also been a cautious adopter and user of social media. However, some of the research that is starting to come out now is showing that portions of the community believe and acknowledge that there is value to their work and the dissemination and exchange of knowledge. I'm going to today focus mostly on Twitter. Because of all the mainstream channels, I think it is the one most relevant to this audience today. So before we dive in, I want to try to get a sense of people's familiarity with Twitter. So in your webinar controls, where you see Q&A and chat, I think it's likely across the bottom, there should be a button for raise hand. So if you are active on Twitter, please raise your hand. Okay, so I think we're at about 17, 18, give or take. Okay, so 19, so if you raise your hand, click on lower it. Okay, and now if you are not active on Twitter, raise your hand. Okay, so we have a bit of a mixed bag today. And so what I didn't want to take up too much time today is going through the basics of using Twitter or sending tweets, because A, that information is everywhere. But also, if you have specific questions about getting started, you can let me know and I can send you one of my guides by email to help you get started. So as active, it was pretty much if you know what you're doing and you have an account and you might log into it once in a while, versus people who don't have a Twitter account and haven't really checked it out. So a little bit about Twitter. Twitter started back, I believe, in 2006. It now has approximately 319 million active monthly users. So those are the people who log in at least once a month. Compared to somewhere like Facebook, where you have to be friends with someone, it can be quite open, which makes it easy to use, easy to find stuff, easy to grow your following. In the research that I looked at about the use of social media in the science and research community, scientists responded that they use it primarily to connect with other scientists, share their content, as well as participate remotely in conferences by following the conference hashtag. Some of the barriers within the science community include a lack of familiarity, don't know how to get started, or perceive it as a waste of time. Now, the benefits that some scientists have cited of using Twitter is the size and diversity of the potential audience, the accessibility of both the platform and content, the opportunities for networking and collaboration, as well as the ease of communicating snippets of information, easily sharing articles, posting videos, and whatnot. LinkedIn. LinkedIn is something that people have traditionally just thought of as an online resume, so for when you're job searching or when you're hiring. It has evolved, especially over the past few years, to being much more of a networking platform well beyond the job search. So they have an estimated 530 million users. They understand that LinkedIn is a platform that might not be a daily media like Twitter would be, that people sort of go in and out sporadically. It boasts 10 million active job posting and information on 9 million companies. And it's estimated that 3 million people share content on it each week, with an estimated 100,000 articles being published every week. One user, the average user, has about 400 connections. Facebook is by far the most popular of the social media channels. It has 1.23 billion daily active users, which is nearly a quarter of the world's population. Nearly 80% of online adults, so people who are connected to the internet, have a computer or access to a computer, have a Facebook account. It is by far the most popular. So even when you hear about things like Instagram and Snapchat growing at such a rapid pace, the numbers are still showing that Facebook is by far the most used. Now, when we think about it professionally, it's not used in a professional manner, so to speak. So the science and researchers, for example, use it mostly for their offline relationships and personal interests, following pages and people that they like, not necessarily for promoting their own work. However, if you were working to promote a business or an organization, Facebook would likely be a very valuable tool that you would use. Whenever I have a client who asks me about being on social media and what channels they should be on, it's never the same answer for someone. It really depends on who they are, what they're trying to do, and who they're trying to connect with. So now we're going to get to the heart of social media, and I'm going to begin talking about your individual social portfolio. So this to me is worse than not being on social media. As a communications manager hiring a team, I would frown more at this than someone's profile picture with a bottle of vodka in it. That, to me, if you're in communications and marketing, you should not have this. And I would just want to let you know this is a different Kate Headley. This is not me. I'm starting here. I'm starting with the portfolio today because if you're going to look at putting effort into attracting new followers and making new connections, you want to make sure there's something for them to see. So if you go on Twitter and you start following all these people, they'll see that you're following them and they'll go check you out and they'll come to this and they won't see anything about you. And so it's really that first impression. And this is something that it's not just for when you're starting out, it's for down the road as well. So for example, if I'm in the process of landing or onboarding a new client, I will deliberately make sure that my recent activity on public social media reinforces the brand that I've put forth to them. If you're applying for a job or presenting at an upcoming conference, take stock of your feeds and make sure that the content on your page reflects what you want to put out there. It's also a good reminder once in a while to do a little clean sweep to take out anything personal or a little bit too political. As I said earlier, people can be intimidated by the vastness of social media. The amount of content that is shared daily from around the globe is absolutely staggering. So as a professional, this is why it's important for you to have a clear idea of what you're looking to get out of being on social media and what you have to offer others. To start us off, we're going to take a look at the account of David Steen. Hopefully this will work quickly. So this is David Steen. And right off the bat, we can see that he has a tweet that's pinned to the top that introduces himself and what he does. He has lots of great imagery. I mean, great being a subjective word, depending on how you feel about snakes. He has a profile picture of himself, so you know that what he looks like and that it is indeed a person. He's included a bio, and he's even included hashtags. And as a side, I'll just note that if someone is searching for wildlife, he will come up in those search results because he has included hashtags here. So that's one way that he gets found more. So this is the example of a profile of someone who you can tell right away what they're all about, what they do. If anything, he retweets a little too much, I think, because it's hard to find out what he's saying, but sometimes that's just the ebb and flow of how social media goes. So I'm going to go back now. So for those of you who are just building their social media portfolios or wanting to ramp them up, you want to start with your why and what you're doing, what you want from it. So ask yourself, why do you want to be on social media? What are you about? What are your interests? And what do you have to offer others? Meaning, what kind of content, whether it's of your own creation or of your networks, that you're going to share. If I'm not answering your question right away, we'll get to them at the end of the presentation, but I just want to make sure that everyone can hear me, so I will periodically check. So one of the questions that I hear most often, especially from subject matter experts of one kind or another, is, do I have anything to say? Or some will say that social media is just a bunch of people posting pictures of breakfast or yelling at an airline, which, to be fair, is not entirely untrue. But once you have a sense of what you want from social media and what you have to offer, you'll be able to find your communities. And just as what you want to read about what your peers are doing, they want to know what you have to say as well. So really, these are examples of things that you might already not realize that you have to share on your feeds. So updates, opportunities, challenges related to the work that you are specifically doing. News from or job openings or research grants with your employers. Sharing content from someone else to which you can add some comments to ask questions. News or articles. A great tip is, if you want to share news, set up a Google News alert about topics that you're interested in talking about. And so when something interesting comes up, you get that Google alert and you can share it in a timely and relevant fashion. Just keeping up with the Q&As to make sure that nothing needs to be. Okay, so I'm going to leave those questions till later, but we will get to them. So your content, your feed that shows up on Twitter is all made up of why you're on it, who you're trying to connect with, who are you wanting to have a dialogue or conversation with, and what you want others to know about me. So whether it's a job employer or whether it's a colleague, what is it that you want to present to others? Think of your social media, I mean, not too restrictively, but think of it almost as an abstract about yourself in a way. And I'm just going to reiterate some things that we saw in the previous profile. You know, you have a simple or catchy username that could be just as simple as your name. You don't have to get super creative. A nice clear photograph that people can see that you're a real person. I cross out followers here because, again, it's not necessarily about your followers. It's not all about your followers, but when you go to a page and you find someone on Twitter, you want to see that they're following other people as well. So make sure that you're looking at both sets of lists, that you're following a good group of people that are going to present the information that you want to see, but also know that people might look at who you are following when they arrive on your feed. And then current, that kind of goes back to the blank profile that I shared earlier. Make sure it's not that you have to tweet or post every day, but make sure that you're current and that it looks active if you are indeed trying to attract people. So we just covered some of the basics of how to get yourself set up with a portfolio, and I'm going to move on now to your followers and audiences. I use the word cultivation rather deliberately here. Whenever I see posts about growing your audience, I always think it's about buying followers. And too many people are focused on that number, especially in an influencer era where people are making ridiculous amounts of money posting about weight loss shakes and tea. So cultivation to me denotes the process and the effort and the care it takes to building a meaningful audience that you can get something out of. So just as it takes work to keep friendships and coworker relationships productive and meaningful, so too does your social media engagement. When we think of the word media just on its own, it's very passive. So news information is just being projected at you. And as an audience, we don't participate. Put the word social in front of it and it's entirely different. We participate, we engage, we react. If there are any professors listening today, I imagine you would love some two-way engagement with your students. So imagine if you were giving a lecture and you could see little thumbs up appearing after a great point or having one of your slides retweeted. The priority with social media should extend far beyond knowledge dissemination. It's really about the exchange. So tactically speaking, there are a few ways that we engage with people on social media. Dialogue, so talking back and forth, replying to posts and tweets, liking, sharing, retweeting, offering comments and feedback, and then click. This isn't the notion of tweeting others the way you want to be tweeted. It's not a shot at Donald Trump, but it's not quite as altruistic as it seems either. It's also about being noticed. So every time you do one of the above, every time that you like and share something or you comment or you follow someone, that users can see who has followed them. So if they have a post that's retweeted, it alerts them to your presence. So it's that way of getting yourself noticed, of building your audience. It's that two-way approach where you want to be a good social media user who's just exchanging information, but you also want to use that interaction to your benefit to alert people to your presence and maybe attract them to follow you, maybe get them to check out your profile and share your content. There are a number of ways then that to get your content noticed. So remember, even if you have a lot of followers, if a lot of people are following you, your post is just one amongst a constantly updating feed of heaven knows how much content. So you do have to put a little bit of work into getting your content noticed and prompting others to interact with you. So what do I mean by media rich? It means that it has video, means that it has images or GIFs. It's concise. So even though Twitter just released or just updated its character count to be 280, does not mean that you have to use all 280 characters. It's really those easy to digest snippets. Questions and polls, which prompt people to interact with your messages. Relevant, that there's something going on in the world, or it's new research. Timely, digestible. Actions, where you prompt someone to take an action, whether it's visit a website or read this paper, or even share this post with your people. And then of course the infamous hashtag, in that hashtags, as I mentioned, first came about as a way to keep track of conversations, and the users today will probably be very familiar with that because it does help them keep track of, say, conferences that they're not able to attend. You can watch the hashtag and participate in it just as well. But hashtags do something else, in that they help get your content to a wider audience. So for example, there might be a sponsor at a conference and they are tweeting something. They know that they can tweet using that hashtag, and that all the people who are following that conference will see their tweet. So even if you don't follow that sponsor or that presenter, their hashtag will appear in that feed about what's going on at the conference, and you're more likely to see them. So it's that twofold. It's keeping track of conversations, but it's also getting you out to a wider audience. I wanted to take a bit of time to go through some practical elements, and then right after we will move into Q&A so we can deal with those specific questions. So we're gonna take a quick look at Neopar's page. So once you've set up your Twitter account, and once you've started following people and you wanna find more people to follow and build your audience, one of the great ways that you can do is you can go and take a look at some of the accounts, whether it's an organization or an individual that you like or that you're like-minded to, and you can, what I like to say is, poach their followers or follow the followers. So I can go and I can see I'm interested in learning more about marine environment. So I'm going to take a look at Neopar, a leader in the industry, and I'm going to see who they're following. And so I can see all the accounts that they are following, that they deem interesting, that they deem important to stay on top of. And I can say, oh yes, I should follow this ocean school and the University of PEI and this professor. So I'm going to just start clicking on all these following, and I'm going to help build out my research. Sorry, my feeds. Same, I can go to, okay, who is following Neopar? I might want to connect with them, and I want to take a look at what they're researching. Or I want to follow this person who's doing a great webinar. You can go into their followers list, click on following, and remember that each time you click on follow, Isabel Hurley will see that you have followed them, and that will alert Isabel to your presence, and hopefully she will follow you back. And that's one way that you're growing a network. So as I've mentioned, there is an infinite amount of content being shared from everywhere. And so when you go on twitter.com, this is what you get. These are the people that I'm following, what they're sharing, what's going on. This is a lot of content. So I want to take you through a tool that I use called TweetDeck. TweetDeck is a best friend to someone like me, primarily because it helps me manage multiple accounts. So I have my social media accounts, but then I also have clients who I post on behalf of and manage their online community. TweetDeck is also great for people who want to organize and clean up the clutter of these feeds of people sharing their breakfasts and yelling at airlines to something that they can actually stay on top of. And so TweetDeck is a Twitter tool. It's not necessarily a third-party app, and it's just tweetdeck.com, and it's linked to your Twitter account. And what's really cool is the columns. And so you can organize columns based on a whole bunch of things. And so I have a column here on the very left that is just my news feed. So this Twitter feed is right in here. I have a column specifically related to people who are mentioning me in tweets. So I can keep track of who's tweeting about me or at me. And then I have a number of columns that are set up on searches. So I've built a Twitter list of people that I am interested in keeping tabs on. And so they build up this list. I have a column related to a couple of important hashtags based on what industries I work in, so health and political, so that anyone who's using this hashtag, I can see what they're tweeting about. It's a way to really break down that clutter. And then again, if I just keep going, these are all the different clients and organizations I work with. So TweetDeck is a tool that I use and I recommend. It takes a bit of playing around with, but it really can help you keep on top of the content that you want to see. I did mention that we would go back to LinkedIn, and I don't want to so much talk about, I'll just double check on the chat. I don't want to focus so much on building your profile on LinkedIn, because it really is like putting your resume into a template. And it's a little bit more straightforward, but I do want to talk a little bit about the other features of LinkedIn and how it can help. So there's your LinkedIn profile that has information about your work experience, your current positions, whether you're looking, who you're connected to, and whatnot. But it also operates very similarly to Facebook in that you can post and share and like. They also have LinkedIn groups. And so these are, they are all closed groups now in that you request to join them. And they are a place for professionals to share content specifically with other like-minded or peers. You can get jobs, you can make specific contacts. It's also a way to put forward your expertise. And I'll show you a couple examples. So if you go to the LinkedIn groups, there are most often discussions or people are sharing. So for example, I have one here in a group that I'm a part of, public relations and communications professionals. Someone posted something interesting about writing a communication strategy, and it's got a good amount of comments. This here is an opportunity for me to share my knowledge about communication strategies. So I'm not waiting for a presentation opportunity or a meeting to go into. I follow these groups and I contribute and I give comments and I give feedback as a way to showcase who I am. And that's one way that you're building your network. And it's the same with what you can do on Twitter, is when you're sharing comments and you're positioning, it's giving you a platform to share your expertise or your perspective and your opinions. I'm also, I'm just going to go back here. The other great thing about Twitter, about LinkedIn groups, so when you go on LinkedIn.com, you can search for their groups by, searching in the search bar for any topics, but you can also search the groups of your network. So I'm going to go to my colleague Heather's page, who works with Neopar. And I know that her and I work in similar industries. And so I'm going to see where she's active with. So I went to her profile and I went down to the interests, and I can see all. And I can click on groups, and I can see all the groups that she is part of. And I can get ideas for, okay, the Canadian social media professional, that sounds like something I should be involved in. I'm going to follow them. So there's those two ways. There's up in the search bar, you can just search for topics. And you can go to groups, and you could see all the groups that are related to the marine industry. Or you can go by your network and see what groups they're a part of and where you can participate. This is, I think the researchers will really appreciate this because it's the importance of evaluation. And even as a person, as an individual user, you might want to take a look at how you're doing on social media to get a sense of whether you're growing well, if people are engaging with you. And Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn all have good, relatively easy to access analytical tools that can help you take a look at how you're doing, where you don't have to go to a third-party app. So I'll just give you a quick rundown of these tools here. So when I was on Twitter, I'll go back and I'll show you how to access this. And I clicked on my picture, and I got analytics down here. And analytics is really just a breakdown of how many new followers I have so far this month, how many views my content is getting. And it just gives you a sense of how you're doing, whether people are engaging with you. Are people retweeting you? Are people commenting? And then the same with the link. The same with the LinkedIn, in that you can see how your feeds are doing. And I apologize, I should have this ready to go. If you go into your posts and activity, and you can take a look at all your posts that you've made, and you can see how many people have viewed it, how many people liked it and commented on it. So those are just a couple ways, easy ways that I wanted to show you that you can get a good sense of how you're doing and who's engaging with you. Just find my place again. So that's just a quick overview of evaluation. So now is the question period, and I know we already have a lot, so I'm just going to start going through them. And so if you have questions, type them in the Q&A and we'll get to them in order. The first question I have is, how do you control what shows on the tweet list from organizations that you follow? So there's a couple answers there, but basically your Twitter list, and I'll bring it up to show you, your Twitter list is made up of people you follow. So this is just a chronological feed of what people are tweeting that I follow. That's sort of the basic answer, is that it's just all the content that people are putting out. Facebook especially, you might have been hearing in the news lately about algorithms. Facebook is notorious for it. Twitter has started to get into it as well. It's basically the code behind the content to push what gets shown to you. So for example, if I'm working for the Canadian Nurses Association and I have 5,000 followers on my Facebook page, when I post something, it doesn't mean that all those 5,000 people are going to see what I've posted. Based on my engagement rates, what kind of content I'm sharing, is there something interesting, like is it video, or does it sound like clickbait? Facebook's algorithm is going to choose who gets that content, because what they're trying to do is make sure that your feeds are made up of the most relevant stuff to you. Twitter does that as well. They put content that you're most likely to interact with, or that they think that you're most interested in. So when you ask, how do you control what shows on the tweet list? You don't necessarily control what shows up in your feed, even though you're following people. So that's why an application like TweetDeck can help, because I'm controlling what I'm seeing. I'm saying that I want to see all the tweets that have used the hashtag of Canadian health. So you can get around it by using an app like this. But if you're just on the Twitter site itself, you're going to be shown, you know, what Twitter thinks you should be seeing. So it's not as straightforward as an answer. So if you are specifically looking for something or someone, I suggest using something like TweetDeck, or another easy way is to build a list. And I can do a quick show of how you do that. I have a number of lists here that I have built, and I've assigned people to them. So I have a list of specifically of news outlets, of people in my industry, for example. So I built that list, and this feed is based on this list. So anyone that I have put on this list, I'm going to see their tweets. So between TweetDeck and lists, you can sort of wade through all the content that's being shared. So I hope that that has helped. Tips on how to get verified by Twitter. There is a process for it, and they have recently, I think it was last year or the year before, they opened it up. And so it's basically an application now. I mean, a lot of it has to do with the followers that you have and the profile that you offer. So if you're trying to get verified by Twitter, you have to demonstrate that you have a profile or a position that is, I guess, for lack of a better word, is that worthy of being verified. A news source, for example, or a journalist, for example, get verified so that people know that that's a trusted source. So if you are indeed a researcher, a professor, a writer, you want to get verified so that people know that you are a verified source, that you're a trusted source of information. And so really it's about to actually go through the verification process. What you want to do is you want to build up your following. You want to have a nice clean feed with lots of rich information. You want to work on getting your engagement numbers up. That's how you get it, but really it's filling up that application. And it can take a while, but they've opened it up recently, and so it's, you know, it's not just celebrities now. It is opened up to, you know, regular people just like us. The age demographic of Twitter. That's a good question. It's definitely one of the more older ones compared to, say, Snapchat or Instagram. There are pockets of youth, because what happened was Facebook was around, and then that younger generation came up, and I think didn't want to be on Facebook anymore where their parents are, and like sort of the immediacy of it, the quickness, the brevity. But Twitter is really that pocket of, I would say, of the 29 and over. The demographics of Twitter also seem, while it's a smaller group, the people who are active on it are meaningfully active on it, for lack of a better word. And so they really do make the most of it. It peters out probably around when you start to go above 50. Facebook actually has, I think it's 50 and over, especially among women, are the fastest growing Facebook demographic. And if you think why, it's moms and grandmas keeping in touch with family. So Twitter really is that middle spot of, I'd say 29 to maybe 55 as well, that are most active on Twitter. And I'm just reading the rest of your question now. It really depends. So seeming to prefer direct emails and newsletters. I think as you get a little bit older, I can definitely see that those direct emails, they're used to that. Like, I mean, email's been around so much more longer, so they're used to and comfortable and familiar with getting their information that way. But again, it really depends on what they're doing and what you're trying to get out of them. So it goes back to, it's not so much just about age, but it's who they are. And so if they're academics, they're probably used to that email a little bit more still. There's still some reticence in the academic community about social media because it can seem a little bit silly in terms of people talking about their breakfast and the Kardashians and whatnot. So it still does have that rep. But I think you're seeing the age shift a little bit more because the early adopters back in 2006, I mean, they're growing older right now. So I think it will shift a little bit. And you'll start to see it's definitely not the youth social media though. Tapping to start. Okay. This is a good question that we get a lot. If one has two unrelated careers, do you recommend having two social media accounts, one for each career, or one account to post events happening in both careers? So as a communication social media professional, I get that question a lot in that, should I have a personal and a professional social media account? To which I usually say no, because you're trying to show that you're a well-rounded individual. If you have two unrelated careers though, for example, that might actually be a better scenario for you. Usually my concern with splitting up social media accounts is that you're diluting your audience. So for example, I volunteer with Dress for Success that helps women with professional suits. And there's always the question, should we have a separate account for our signature annual fundraising gala? Because we tweet so much and we post so much about it, should we separate it? And I always say no, because you're diluting your audience. It takes time to build that audience over time. But if you have two unrelated careers, I think that would be a case where you would have separate groups because you're building up two distinct audiences that have distinct needs and wants. It will take time because you're doubling your efforts, but it wouldn't be a bad idea in that case to have separate accounts. Also, it seems, I'm not sure of the whole situation, but you also don't want to confuse people if they are unrelated sectors or industries. You want to make sure that when people come to your feed, that they can see quickly and clearly what you're all about. For Twitter, is there a recommended level of language we should use? How jargon heavy or what grade level? That's another good question. And for Twitter, I wouldn't be so concerned with Twitter about the level of language that you use. I would be most concerned, I would primarily be concerned with the ability to read something quickly. So if you're worried about jargon, you have to remember that the people who are following you, again, depending on what your purpose is, but it might be quite likely that you're speaking to your peers or your networks when you're tweeting. So it wouldn't so much be worried about jargon not being understood, but you have to acknowledge that people are skimming Twitter quickly, or they're skimming it on their phones, they're browsing, and so they might not have time to read, a very complex sentence. So I would be most concerned with writing it in a way that people get the idea quickly and concisely, and they can make the decision quickly about whether they keep on reading or click on the link. That being said, if you're in the business of enhancing science literacy or helping communicate science research to the public, that's a whole other ballgame. And then that would really, that depends on what you're talking about, and you would want to use language that is simply understood by, a wide base. So if you're talking with researchers, I mean, you're talking to your peers, just remember that they're likely on their phone or computer, and they're not going to give it the same attention as they would in email. But if you're trying to talk to the public and get across complicated information, definitely keep in mind reducing that jargon. And then, of course, you have to keep it within a certain amount of characters, so you have to pare that down as well. Would you recommend using Instagram cross-posting, best way to repurpose content on multiple platforms? So 2 things with Instagram. Instagram is, of course, as you know, all images. So I would recommend Instagram if you have great visuals and images to share, because that's what's going to populate your feed and keep people interested. The other important point to note about Instagram is that it's difficult to share web links on Instagram. In the caption, for example, on the photo itself, you can't include a hyperlinked URL. You can do hashtags, and that's why you'll see link in bio, because that's the only place you can put something that's clickable. So depending on what you're using it for, that might not be, or what kind of interaction you're trying to get from people, that might not be the best way to go. But if your objective really is, awareness and engagement and just building up a following, then that's okay, and that works well. Again, it comes back to who your audience is, and are you looking for, that younger demographic, and do you have the photos to populate your feed? Cross-posting and the best way to repurpose content on multiple platforms. So cross-posting is always helpful in that you have different audiences and you're just trying to maximize your reach. In my case, it's also about showing that I'm active on all the social media fronts. The best way to repurpose content on multiple platforms, what you would start with is you would take a look at your content and what you have to share, and you would figure out who of my audiences needs to see this and why is it important. And so you have to understand who follows you on Facebook, who follows you on Twitter, who follows you on Instagram, and how might I change that up. A really good example is back with the Nurses Association, in that our Twitter, the majority of our followers on Twitter were, well, for one, researchers, government, and a lot of other organizations and companies. Whereas Facebook was where we got the individual members who had Facebook personally, individually. And so for things that were really specific to our members, they got heavily promoted on Facebook rather than Twitter, where it was a whole bunch of people and other organizations and government. So knowing who your audience is on those different channels and how they use those channels perhaps differently will help you figure out what's the best way to cross-post your content. While it's dependent on individual user wants needs, do you find in general that having a Twitter account really makes a difference when it comes to job research opportunities? Would it actually give you an edge, so to speak? It gives you an edge in that you can communicate a lot about yourself outside of a resume. So in a resume, they see my job experience, my education, that I have references and that I have skills, but there's no personality to it. They can't necessarily see what I'm interested in or what I think about this, or that I'm involved with this. And so it really is, it gives you that edge in that they can see what makes up all of you. It's that well-rounded individual. So on Twitter, you can do that because you can tweet about things that you're interested in. You can put forth your positions or your thoughts. They can see that you're articulate, that that you can think for yourself. It really is that way to round out your personality, so to speak. On Twitter, for my purposes, it's important because I want clients to see me using social media effectively and regularly and keeping up to date with trends. So it's really just about figuring out what you want to show to people. So for job or research perspectives, what is it that you want them to know about you? And then what can you post on Twitter and social media that demonstrates that? So I do think it makes a difference. I think it's commonplace now for people to do a Google search on people that they're hiring or going to work with. I think that's quite commonplace now. So it is easier to find people on social media, and I think people, I know I do, and I know I'm biased, but I think a lot of people are starting to do internet searches on people, and so they can find you, and they'll sort of get that extra layer beyond your resume or prospectus. I don't have a comment on ResearchGate. I apologize. I'm aware of it, but I don't know much about it. So I apologize that I don't have it. I know that it's in my research. It was one that was heavily cited as a useful tool for researchers. And so I think it's worth investigating depending on what you're trying to get out of it. Do other people see that? Also, I'm a bit confused. Do people come to my Twitter home? When people who follow you, when they enter on Twitter, everyone's home is made up. Everyone's homepage like this is different in that it's populated by posts of the people who they follow. So your home is going to look different than my home in that you and I follow different people. And so I think that answers your question. Or your homepage. Yes, so your homepage is really just for you. So only I can see this Twitter homepage exactly as it appears because it's populated completely by my the 3,600 accounts that I follow. That's where that content is being pulled from. So depending on who you follow, that's what will make up your homepage. Okay, so I think that's it for questions. I think I got them all.
Great. Thank you so much, Kate. We just want to, once again say thank you to you for sharing your experience and knowledge with social media and building a brand. And thank you to everyone who tuned in. We hope you found the webinar helpful. And we will be sending out the recording within a couple of days. Our next webinar in February, we'll look at how to write an effective resume. So a little bit of a different focus. And you can register for it now on our website. So once again, thanks everyone.